Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 5 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, roll call. All directors are present. Moving on to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to request that we move agenda item 6A up before item number 5. That would be moving the audit up before the Mojave Water Agency presentation.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to approve with changes?
I'll move the agenda with changes.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The agenda is approved. All right, moving on to public comment. Do I have anyone in person that would like to make a public comment? Mr. Barnes?
So this is a public comment that's not so much about CSD, but about things in the area in general. I've been less than thrilled about what I saw as things went through the process. CSD went through the process of dealing with water rates. And looking into it, I just realized that a lot of it comes down to issues with the Mojave Water Agency and the Mojave Basin adjudication and things that have come out of that. And it just seems to me like there's some issues with the way Mojave Water Agency has handled things. And I know this is not for the board. This is something that I'm also planning to take to the Mojave Water Agency, just these concerns. A big one for me is that it just looks like with the Mojave Basin adjudication, the way it's worked out and the way things have gone is that present people who live in this area have to make sacrifices so that growth can continue to happen, population growth can continue to happen in the area, and that just doesn't seem to me to be something that's actually necessary. And I think it's a problem with our political process that we're prioritizing growth over the needs of current people, along with the fact that we have these government agencies that are working at odds with each other, that the county has so much control over wells for individual users and over zoning and approval for stuff like that, but that, for instance, PPH CSD doesn't have the ability to say no if someone wants to come in and build a house and get water. We have to accommodate the growth that comes in by law. There's no choice on our end, but we suffer, the people in this area suffer, because that just means more water is being used. And what, we're going to put more straws in the ground to grab more water? No. So as a result of that, then all of a sudden our water rights get taken away, and they're just spread out for this population growth that may or may not happen down the road, while also not taking into account the number of private wells that go in that, again, CSD has no control over in the area, and it seems like the Mojave Water Agency doesn't even have control over. And so I look at the adjudication and the negotiations that went into that adjudication, and I think that they were incomplete, and that more work should have been done with other government organizations to make sure that everyone was on the same page. And yeah, it just really concerns me. I know that we're just on the back end receiving the results of what has happened with everything. But honestly, at the end of the day, it looks to me like what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s just sort of leaves the water master with no consequences for having not properly dealt with water in the past. And I think that's a problem. And I'm going to be bringing this up to the Mojave Water Agency as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is James Barkan. This is my daughter, Star. I wanted to bring to your attention to the water department, especially that I received a very, very bad treatment, disrespectful treatment from the customer service. And they told me it's because of the policy. Number one, if I getting the service, I bet you many other people getting the same service because I was polite. I was talking to the people over there, same manners, without screaming, without anything. So I have an issue which I don't want to bring it right now, but the issue is for you to know that I got punished for something that happened. I was told that, number one, I have to pay next time in cash. And this is I need to go, it's more bothering to go to the bank, cash it, and bring it back, when, in effect, I don't have nothing in my past. I asked what is the history of my past, and I was told 7 years ago I had a problem, the last problem.
Can I explain?
Yes.
So he had an incident, the only account, he's had the account for over 30 years. So he's been a loyal customer, and he's had one other incident, and what this one is right now is that he has give me your checkbook. He has two checkbooks that look exactly alike. He filled out his last check in a checkbook that has it was a closed account, and they're trying to charge him $30 for a
bill.
$40 bill. So, and then he was trying to be cooperative and just see how he can go about it. And I guess he was met with very rude treatment about it. And also, they told him he can only pay from cash or with cash going forward, although it was a mistake and he's never had a prior incident aside from 7 years ago.
I think so. This the last problem.
And which was a completely different, it wasn't like a same issue. But basically what his issue is, I guess they were like really rude to him when he brought it to their attention.
I was waiting, I spoke with the gentleman over there. That was, decent treatment. But he told me to write a letter, otherwise, and explain everything. Otherwise, I don't, they're not going to look at this. The company itself. And I have Parkinson. My hands are shaking all the time. That's why I hold the hand in the pocket. And I explained them, okay, they wouldn't look. I said, where's the manager? The public customer service manager. Oh, she's on vacation for a week. Waited a week, came exactly, they told me to come on Wednesday. I came on Wednesday, and she was there, and she wasn't right. She said, oh, you had already problems, you had this, you had that. 30 years I'm with the company. I have property here, 30 years. So the last incident 7 years ago, and I didn't let her to finish the sentence because it's not interesting what 7 years ago happened. Even if you have a bad credit, 7 years it's gone. And I'm very dissatisfied with the employee that calls herself customer service manager. She said, I cannot decide on nothing. I need to approve this and to approve that. You're the manager. Treat me decently. Tell me, Mr. Barkan, come at this time or that day, and I will come and we can straighten up. My bank didn't charge me nothing because by mistake it's closed account. I got a letter from my bank, and they didn't charge because the account is closed. So I was expecting that I wouldn't get charged here also. She said this bank charged $30. Then I showed her this, and she said, oh, not this bank, another bank. So bring me the receipt, I will pay. If this is what your bank charging, give me the receipt. It's happened to other people. I heard complaints from other people. So maybe you guys can straighten up over there so the customer going to be first And then all of you, all of you, I'm sorry for that I'm excited, but all of you doing a job. It's a very important job for everyone. I'm kind here for everyone, not only for me. I can afford to pay penalty, more than $30, but it's not right. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank
Sir,
you.
thank you for coming in. I'm Don Bartz, I'm the general manager. Come in and talk to me. I'd heard about that one. Come in and talk to me. I'd like to take a look at the details of that. Because
Absolutely.
we do get charged for return checks, but I will look at that, but I want to look at yours specifically and what happened.
Sure,
And we can certainly do that.
sure.
Thank you.
You were also on vacation because
Okay.
you also were on vacation, just for everyone to know. That's why I didn't see you before I came here. I was asking for the manager, and they told me you on vacation,
That's
right?
correct. That is
You
correct.
came only today back to work.
Yes, I came back to work today.
Okay, so I just wanted to clear this.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right. So I don't see any other members of the public in person or online. So we will move to community reports, and I don't see any of those either. All right. All right, so we will move on to agenda item number 3, consent items. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull? All right.
If not, I'll move the consent items.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent items passed. So we had no consent items removed. So this is where we are going to move agenda item 6A up. Presentation, discussion, and possible acceptance of the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Christopher Brown with CJ Brown and Company CPAs, and we will go ahead and go on through a review of the audit itself. I do have a question here, though. Yeah, if you don't mind, that would probably be easier because I'm going to be flipping some pages here. Okay, go ahead. Let's move to the next slide. Okay. So once again, we're going to go through the audit. We did meet a couple of weeks ago with the Finance Committee and went through the audit and the report in greater detail. So I'm going to kind of give you the higher level view of this. But the audit was performed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. That's the body that basically provides, or that's the document that basically provides the methodologies that we must use when we're performing audits. The audit itself is made up of several aspects, among them pre-year end, post-year end. Part of it is assessing the district's internal controls. We're agreeing balances to the supporting documentation and performing analysis of the key relationships within the financial statements themselves. There are two documents that come out of the audit, one being the ACFR, the financial statement itself, and the other one being the management report. And within the financials themselves is the auditor's opinion. And you can see that there. This is one paragraph out of the whole document. It says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of Phelan Piñon Hills Community Services District as of June 30th, 2023. So congratulations on that. Okay. I'm fading. Go ahead and go. There we go. There we go. In addition to unmodified opinion or a clean opinion, I want to make note that the district did receive the award for Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the year 2022. So last year's report was submitted to Government Finance Officers Association. They reviewed it and they provided you with the award. And it is my expectation that you will submit the 2023 award as well. And it's my expectation that you will win the award for 2023 as well. It is a very prestigious award, and it's only It's only given out to those that report at the highest level. So this really means something. So congratulations on that. Go ahead and go to the next one. The other report that I mentioned is the management report, and that is the auditor's communication to you, the board. You're my boss, essentially. We report to you. It's your best interest that we have in mind when we're reporting. Within the management report, as you can see, the bullet points there, it's our communication to the governing board, and it shows the auditor's responsibility under auditing standards. So it kind of spells that out. The scope of our audit, what we're doing, basically goes over the accounting practices. There's an incorrect word in there. It says commissions. It should say district. But the accounting practices, if we come across anything that seems unusual, we would list it there, and there were no unusual accounting practices. Any corrected or uncorrected misstatements are in there, or adjustments. I shouldn't just say misstatements, just adjustments. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit, and there were none. And there were no disagreements with management. It was a pretty textbook audit for 2023. Okay, I'm going to go to my notes because I can't really see that from here. Yeah, if you can, good for you. Okay, so what we see here is actually in the financial statements itself. It's in the management's discussion and analysis, and it's a condensed aggregation of the information that is further back in the document. It's kind of the top level. And what it's doing is it's showing governmental type activities, business type activities by year, 22, 23, comparing them. And it's showing the change. The column all the way to the far right is showing the change in the total amounts for the district for between the 2 years. Kind of keep this high level. What it does show is that total assets increased, I'm going to kind of round some things here, 7.8 million from the prior year. Deferred outflows of resources, which is related to pension obligations. It actually decreased 378,000. As we move into our liabilities section, we can see total liabilities increased approximately 6 million. Then we move down into deferred inflows. There again, that's related to pension obligation. It
Excuse me,
shows
sir, this is page big 66 for anybody that's following along.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Deferred inflows of resources, there again, it's related to pension obligation. It's kind of the opposite of the deferred outflows that we talked about above. And it was a decrease of approximately 223,000. We see net investment in capital assets decreased approximately 4 million. Unrestricted net position increased approximately 5.9. Now let me just kind of go through the 2023 column, which is the third from the right there. This represents the total district's amount, okay, balances. And when we get into net position, what I just mentioned previously, it's kind of like the net worth. It's what's assets minus your liabilities, essentially. And it shows that your investment in capital assets, and I'm looking at the third line from the bottom, of approximately $26 million. It also shows below it the unrestricted. It shows $28,858,000 and change. What I tend to do when I'm looking at the analysis of an entity, what I like to see is an upward trend in that unrestricted amounts. What that's telling me is that it shows efficiency in running an organization. It shows efficiency in rate structures and such. There's many different aspects to it, but those are things I tend to kind of key on over a longer period of time. From any year to year, you can have these variances that go up and down, but what we're looking at, what I tend to look at, is the longer term 5-10 year analysis of that. And of course, we're showing positive movement in that area as well. So I'm going to go ahead and have, Kim, would you please move 2 slides up? Because I don't think anybody's going to be able to read those. They're not going to be able to read that either. Now, go ahead and go back to that table there. Okay, so And which table? This would be on page
67.
67? 66?
This one's 67.
This one's on
Is this the
67?
condensed statement?
Yes.
That's
Activities.
page 67.
So anybody that has access to that, page 67. I have a narrative here. I'm going to read off of this, and I'll try to point out where it would appear on that table there. I'll start at the beginning. Net position. Net position is essentially your net worth. It's the amounts that I was just previously mentioning, what's left over. But it increased from the prior year by 1.6 million to 55,133,000 and change. So it's an improvement. So what that's kind of saying is your net income, you might say, went up approximately 1.6 million to that 55 million as a result of ongoing operations. Now, with regard to that document there, it's showing your revenues and your expenses broken out by total revenues, program revenues, and general revenues. Your program revenues are essentially what you do for a living, selling services. General revenues are taxes, ancillary charges that aren't part of your everyday service that you provide. But this table here shows that total revenues increased by 1,566,000 to 12,720,000. There again, program revenues, what you're doing for a living, decreased approximately 138,000, primarily due to decreases in these various areas that are within your program revenues. And I'll just kind of hit some bullet points here. So decrease is primarily due to approximately 328,000 decrease in water consumption sales. That is what it is. It's what you're selling. It goes up, it goes down. Rainfall affects it, as we all know. Approximately 17,000 in other charges for services, brought it down. 94,000 in general fund charges for services sourcing from county refund of property taxes. Offsetting that was an increase of approximately 196,000 in meter monthly service charges. So what's really driving a lot of this is water consumption sales offset by the meter monthly service charges. That's what's really driving that right there. Moving to the next section, general revenues. There again, general revenues are things like taxes and interest and things like that. General revenues increased by $1.7 million, due primarily to increases of $1.5 million in interest earnings. You put a fairly sizable amount into your investment holdings, and we see the results of that. It's both going to be realized interest, it's going to be unrealized interest, and it's going to be fair market value adjustments at year end is what's going to be driving that number there. Okay. Moving down to the next categories, expenses. We have revenues, we've got the expenses offsetting that. Total expenses increased by $3,050,000 and change to $11,107,000, primarily due to increases of expense, $1.9 million in water general administrative due to pension actuarial changes. Let me explain that. So every year, well, let me back up a little bit. On the condensed statement of net assets, the statement of net assets, there's a line item, and it talks about pension liability. The organization offers a pension. Every year, there's an actuarial study performed by an outside agency, and they basically provides what your liability is, and I'll go into that in just a second. I don't want to spend too much time on it, and what the deferred inflows and outflows are. What they take into account when they're doing this calculation, it's kind of like an insurance policy calculation. They're looking out 20 years, they're looking at what interest rates are now, what the discount rate is, morbidity rates, how many people you have working here, and a big thing is what's the return on the CalPERS in this situation, on their investment portfolio. Every year it goes up and down. Changes in your liability. Well, what we're seeing here is a change in the liability. The other side of it is your expense. So what you're seeing here by this increase in pension actuarial changes is a non-cash adjustment to your liability It's got to go someplace. It goes into your expense line item. So that kind of explains that big number there. There again, it's an adjustment to your pension obligation. Very, very likely next year, it's going to go in a different direction. Just heads up. Okay, it kind of oscillates back and forth. I know that's kind of confusing, but that's really what's going on with that number right there. Continue with the expenses, approximately $286,000 in Parks and Recreation expense, labor, capital outlay, $253,000 in water transmission and distribution, repair and maintenance, and some minor items I won't go into. They're not really material for our conversation here. And then we had a small charge, $18,000 in water pumping, net of solar credits. So, and I basically had this pulled out of the financial statement itself. So you'll see a much more detailed, coherent explanation of the changes that we just went over in management's discussion and analysis in the financial statement itself. So that's pretty much my presentation. Kind of a cap here is the audit went well. We were able to provide you with an unmodified opinion. We did not detect material weakness in your internal controls. And of course, we've just gone through the results of operations. And I will hand it back to you.
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for him before? No? All right. Thank you. Mr. Bartz?
Okay, staff's recommendation is that the board accept the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, as presented by C.J. Brown and Company CPAs.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the audit.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we will move back to item 5, presentations and appointments, OSA Subbasin and Water Master History.
Yes, thank you. We have a couple representatives from Mojave Water Agency here tonight, and they're here to give a presentation on the Water Master history. Should be quite interesting.
Well, let's hope it's interesting. Let's see. I'm used to using it with my right hand. Hopefully it'll move. Is it going to be popping up there?
It will in just a second.
Just a second. Okay. Oh, it's there too. My name is Jeff Roosh. I started at Mojave Water Agency in 1992, which was right in the infancy of the adjudication. So I've pretty much lived it my whole life at Mojave Water Agency. I started as a student intern from engineering, going out in the field and just driving around the desert and looking for people that are pumping water and trying to determine how much they were pumping. So that's a little bit about me. I've moved up and now I'm the manager of the Water Master Department. There you go. It's just a little slow. So Mojave Water Agency was formed in 1960, and it was formed by the state legislature, but that came after the residents of the high desert voted to form the agency. So we've been around for quite some time. We cover an area of nearly 4,900 square miles. This is a very large area. It's not the original area. The area that we refer to as the Morongo Basin, which is down Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree, that area down there, was not originally part of the Mojave Water Agency service area, but they voted to tax themselves a few years after we were formed to basically pay the back taxes to be able to be on the same level playing field as everybody that was in the Mojave Basin to start with. So what we do is we manage the groundwater resources of the high desert, of not only the Mojave Basin, but all of the areas going down to the Morongo Valley. We are also a state water contractor. That picture you see on the screen is an image of one of the canals that bring the water from Northern California down here to the thirsty south. And we are also the Mojave Basin Area Water Master. So that's a little bit about us. Our agency act, very long, very boring. If you would like to fall asleep some night, pull out our agency act and read it. Attorneys wrote it, so it's very difficult to understand. But this part here is not difficult. It says the agency will do any and every act necessary to be done so that sufficient water may be available for present or future beneficial uses. So this is for everybody that lives within the agency boundaries, and it's kind of a prelude to what getting to. The agency has a very large system of delivery capability that was the two pipelines. Well, the one pipeline that goes from White Road heads north up around the Mojave River that you see on this map, which is also available on our website. You could download a much larger picture of it if you would like to. You could even print it out on a plotter, put it on your wall if you really want to see something that big. That pipeline is a direct result of the judgment. So it's one of the things that Mojave Water Agency was ordered to do in that final judgment. The Morongo Basin pipeline, which was actually under construction while we were in the trial phase, or the right before trial, we started building that pipeline. The residents of the Morongo Valley, they actually paid for that pipeline. They voted to tax themselves to put that pipeline in. And so they paid for it. The Mojave Water Agency oversized what they paid for so that we would have delivery capability in the Mojave River. That was initially at Rock Springs on the river, and now it's at Deep Creek. So we actually paid to oversize that pipeline so that we would have additional, well, it was actually the first delivery capabilities to bring that water and put it somewhere other than just Lake Silverwood, which is up north. This is the Mojave Basin. It covers about 3,400 square miles. It's a much smaller area, but still pretty vast. I'd like to say I've driven all of it. I've driven quite a bit of it, but it is a very large area, and probably about 3,000 square miles of that I've actually set my foot in, trying to look and see what's going on out there. We have 5 different sub areas. The area out here is called the Oeste sub area. It's probably the smallest geographically and the most important to you. And I will get into some specifics on why it's important in a little bit later on. So this is the kind of thing that we do. These images are from the Water Master's annual report. The top one has the rainfall, and the bottom one has the inflow that we measure at Deep Creek and West Fork. That's the inflow to the Mojave River from the mountain front. The thing that is most telling about these, you may not see, there's a lot of ups and downs, but looking at what I just highlighted in red, that's the last 6 years or so, not counting the year that just ended. We had really close to the average rainfall or above average rainfall during that time period, yet the inflow to the basin was much less than the average. We only had one of those years that it actually reached that average, and that's very telling of how bad the drought was that we've had here in all of California. We can see that here in this image that I downloaded. This was a year ago this week. It was really bad, probably worse in the Central Valley, but it was bad all in California. There was only one tiny piece up in northwestern California that was yellow that indicates that it was just abnormally dry, not in drought. With the exception of that really tiny piece up there, the whole state of California was in a drought. And then this happened. we got a lot of snow. We got a lot of rain. We had, in our local mountains, people were stuck because they just had so much snow they didn't know what to do with. The California snowpack was greater than it has been for a very, very long time. In fact, the last time that we had 200% of average was in 1983. I don't know if anybody was around in 1983. That was, well, I was still in high school, but I do remember how much it rained. It rained a lot. We had a lot of precipitation in that year. There were only two other years in the history of recording that snowpack that they had that much snow, back in 1969 and 1952. To put a little bit of perspective, May being 241%, that's actually not 241% of a May average, that's of the April 1st average. When you look back in history, the last time that we actually had any measurable snow was in 2020, and it was 1.5 inches. So having, the fact that we had 59 inches of snow left as late as May was an incredible amount of water that came into the California. And as we can see, this is as of October 31st of this year. There is no part of California that is actually in drought. There's a couple areas, the yellow, that's abnormally dry, but our service area is actually out of drought right now, which is really surprised me. I saw an article that came around earlier this week, and I saw this, and I said, that is just so used to drought, it was hard to believe that we didn't have drought conditions here. Because one thing that we always look at is we look at the fact that we're a desert. We live in a perpetual drought. We always have lack of water. This year was a little bit abnormal, and it's not something we can expect every time. This is just something that I threw together. It has the rainfall. We have the line on there is the rainfall in Lake Arrowhead. Much of the whole mountain front here saw very similar patterns of rainfall. This is just the one that the judgment has us look at for the supply to the basin. And we had a little over 75 inches of precipitation, which is just shy of 200% of our long-term average. We had 240,000 acre feet. To put that in perspective, that's about twice the amount of water that is pumped in the whole Mojave Basin on an annual basis. So we got a lot of water in this 1 year, and very little of it left the basin. I think USGS measured about 1,000 acre feet total that left the basin out of Afton Canyon, and a good chunk of that was from precipitation that occurred in Newberry Springs. So it's not the water that flowed into the basin from the mountain front. It was just the water that left from natural. I really like these. We had these put together many years ago. It kind of shows the way that our basin is. We are a groundwater basin. There is, with the exception of maybe a couple people, all of the water up here is surface water, groundwater pumped. So the surface water soaks into the ground, and then we pump it out. We let the ground clean it for us. So this is a kind of a normal and dry area, and then wet of what happens to the basin. All that water gets in there, and the groundwater levels rise. And I hope that everybody is seeing that. We have started to see the ground level rise in pretty much every well that we monitor, and it's a very good thing to see. So to the heart of what I'm here, what is an adjudication? An adjudication, simply stated, is getting in front of a judge and having a judicial procedure to determine the legality of something. And in the water rights adjudication, it was to determine who had water rights to continue to pump or to not continue to pump. It initiated in 1990 when the city of Barstow sued everybody upstream. Southern California Water Company joined with them. They're now Golden State Water Company. They joined with them, and together they claimed that not enough water was coming down the basin. So the judgment was the product of that 1996 ruling by the court. And something else just popped up there, not me. We went to the Superior Court, and it continued to maintain jurisdiction. So the Superior Court kept jurisdiction of everything that's going on.
We're good. Let me just get out of this real quick. Sorry.
No, you're good. So as a result of the judgment, the entire supply of the basin was adjudicated in front of that court. I'll get into a lot more of the specifics of that. Why did we adjudicate? That determines how to allocate the available supply to those who are pumping it, whether it be surface or groundwater. It's fair, it's equitable, it's a way to determine who's going to pay for that imported water and how much of that imported water needs to come in. It has the power of the law. Like I said, the Superior Court in Riverside has maintained jurisdiction over the adjudication. So anything that Watermaster does can be taken to the judge to have a hearing to say, I don't agree with that, and then the judge makes the final decision. It gives us a little bit of certainty, because when everybody has water rights and they know how much water they can pump, you have a little bit of certainty on that water supply. There are 26 basins in Southern California. By and large, the adjudications are all here in the Southern California, because that's where most of the groundwater pumping occurs. Up in the north, they use a lot of surface water, so they don't have the similar issues that we have. They can see the water flowing down the river. We can't see the water that's flowing underground. It makes it really difficult, so that's what the adjudication does. So the overdraft commenced in the 1950s. Surprisingly enough, MWA attempted to adjudicate the water rights starting in the mid-60s, 1964 through 1973, but that adjudication effort failed. Kind of an interesting fact is it was the farmers that didn't like it, yet they were the ones that would have made out better had they adjudicated back then than the municipalities who actually made out better in this adjudication. So like I said, in 1990, Barstow filed a lawsuit, named everybody that was pumping greater than 10 acre-feet annually. It was considered an in-stream adjudication. They claimed that all the pumping in the Victor Valley was resulting in a reduced flow down the river to Barstow and affecting their supply. They demanded delivery of 30,000 acre-feet annually. The average inflow to the basin is about 65,000 acre-feet. So they demanded nearly half of that average supply be delivered to them on an annual basis. And they demanded that MWA be compelled to import water. At the time, MWA wasn't importing a whole lot of water. There was some water that was imported, but not a whole lot. So in 1991, Mojave Water Agency filed a countersuit, and essentially we just sued everybody. We countered Barstow and Southern California Water, and we included everybody. They only included the people upstream. We included the people that live downstream from them, so Daggett, Yermo, Newberry Springs. We included the whole Mojave River Basin as was defined by USGS and the Department of Water Resources in California. We just included every piece of the basin that actually fits geographically inside of our service area. We have no legal authority for the few pieces that are slightly outside of our service area, like here on the San Bernardino LA County line. Part of the Mojave Basin actually crosses over into LA County, and we have no legal authority. Antelope did that recently, which you guys are fully aware of, so I'm nowhere near an expert in that part. It was very complicated. I say you can't see what's happening down below the ground. The geology and the hydrology are very complex. It's very difficult to know what is going on under the ground. Very large, and there were a lot of parties. When it started, I said that they sued everybody that was 10 acre-feet or greater. The initial, when we countersued, it was actually as low as 1. That got bumped up to 5, and then it got bumped up to 10, because we looked at it, and there was about 95% of the water being pumped by about 5% of the pumpers. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to get 5% of the pumping and sue the 95% of the pumpers. To get to a solution much quicker, it was easier to remove the bulk of those minimal producers, and then Mojave Water Agency was left to deal with them on its own after the judgment. One of the things that we were ordered to do as the Mojave Water Agency. It was complicated because, quite frankly, MWA was not trusted. I don't know why. I wasn't living here at the time, but Mojave Water Agency just was not trusted. I like to think that trust has garnered a little bit more support. Everybody downstream blamed everybody upstream. The people upstream said, well, we're closer to the supply, we get it first. So there was a lot of back and forth about all of that. Yet everybody wanted to preserve the historic uses, which just isn't possible. So like I said, it was complicated. So we had an interim judgment in 1993. It was a stipulated judgment, you can say. Probably about 90%, when you looked at the parties that were pumping, agreed to and signed on to that stipulated judgment in 1993. So most of the water being pumped was actually accounted for as far back as 1992, 1993, when that stipulated judgment came about. For the remainder of those pumpers, we had a trial in 1995, and then we had a judgment in January of 1996. That Superior Court judgment was appealed by both Jess Ranch and a group of farmers that became known as the Cardoso Group, mainly because Manuel Cardoso was the first one on the list alphabetically. And the appellate court actually ruled in favor, in part, of Jess Ranch and the Cardoso Group in 1998. Wheels of justice do not move very quickly. We went ahead and took that to the Supreme Court, and they still ruled for the Cardoso Group. Basically, that group of farmers had the ability to do whatever is beneficial on the property that they own. So we were ordered through the Supreme Court to leave them alone. As the water master, we still have to count for how much water they pump. So most of them actually still tell us. They either have to tell us or they have to tell the State Water Resources Control Board how much water they're using. It's easier to tell us because we're local, and so they tell us, and that gets rolled into our calculations as far as the supply and the deficits, et cetera. And then there was this settlement. Jess Ranch actually stipulated to the judgment. They went through all of that, and by stipulating to the judgment, they essentially got what we had offered them in the 1996 judgment. So they really didn't get much of anything out of it other than maybe a few concessions. They have a couple of things that are slightly different than others, but essentially we got settlement for them. So the Mojave Water Agency was appointed in the judgment as the water master. It makes sense because we already had the infrastructure, the staff to be able to deal with it. We were already doing a lot of what water master is supposed to do, and our act told us that we needed to do at least half of what water master came in to do. So it made sense that MWA, to pool resources, just became water master. We were assigned the tasks of building these facilities, the pipelines, recharge basins. We actually have one. It's not a recharge basin yet, but it's in development here in the Oeste sub area. So the judgment gives us that reliable and sustainable long-term water supply because it has that mechanism to be able to import the water. Jumped ahead of myself there. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on which side of the fence you're on, water master really has no discretion in the judgment. The judgment is a set of rules, and water master only can do what that set of rules says. We are constrained annually to recommend ramp down, for example. We have no choice. If the math comes out and the analysis says this and the judgment says thou shalt. So we really have no leeway, shall we say. But that's really what the parties wanted. They didn't want a political entity being able to come and say, well, my constituents said this, so I can't go what the judgment says. Maybe we need to do something else. They didn't want that happening, and the judgment does not allow it. Most important thing that was declared by the judge in the trial was that the basin was declared to be an overdraft. That allows, under California law, a lot of things to happen. It's very, very important that we were declared to be an overdraft. That means that we have access to water a little bit easier. We have access to do a lot of things. I mentioned that the Morongo pipeline was paid by the Morongo residents. The Mojave River pipeline was not paid by those who were subject to the judgment, even though it was required to be put in. We were able to get grants because of the judgment to pay for most of that pipeline. So the facilities are paid for not by the parties, but by MWA through getting all those grants. The production rights were based on the 1986 to 1990, so whatever was pumped during that time frame. That's what that the production rights, or base annual production, was based on. It's kind of interesting because water rights in California are a very fickle thing. Farmers have the paramount right. So an overlier or a riparian right is paramount. That's why there are so many different, throughout the drought, you heard of different water companies that ran out of water. It's because the farmers were getting the water. There's a lot of water in California. 80 to 90% of the water used in California is used for growing something. Interestingly enough, the bottom would be the municipalities. So municipalities in a traditional water rights case would have gotten nothing, and the farmers and everybody that has property along the river would have gotten everything. The judgment, being a stipulated judgment, was an everybody share the pain judgment, and part of the share the pain allowed those farmers to go out of business if they chose to and transfer those rights to the municipality. But everybody that was pumping during 86 to 90 got a water right. So the judgment allows those water rights to transfer from party to party. Collects administrative assessments, biological assessments. we ramp down the production rights to achieve balance. It's mandated in the judgment. Each sub-area is very specific to its own hydrology. And the goal is, well, the judge has made it very clear that not only is the goal to make free production allowance equal to the production safe yield for that basin, it is mandated in the judgment. And even though the judgment says if you're within 5% of that production safe yield, we've seen the judge go step by step to get to the actual production safe yield number. For example, the Alto sub-area is at 50.4%. So we have a fractional reduction in that percent that can be pumped. Judge is very stickler to the letter of the law, and that's his job. So I clicked too quickly. So there are sub-area obligations that are both surface and subsurface. Those are considered a makeup water obligation. So that's an obligation from one sub-area to the downstream sub-area. There's only one instance of that occurring. That's from the Alto sub-area to the Centro sub-area. That speaks to what the city of Barstow was asking for. So that's how that makeup water obligation came. It was really so that one sub-area cannot deplete or cause the depletion of another sub-area that's immediately downstream from it. And then there's replacement obligations. A replacement obligation is going to be for the pumping in that party's specific sub-area. So pumping here in the Oeste sub-area by Phelan Piñon Hills CSD would need to be replaced here in the Oeste sub-area by the importation of that water. But that's only if you pump in excess of the production rate, which, like I said, the judge changes every year. You can either do a replacement purchase or transfer. Essentially, it was just the judgment is to provide the mechanism so that we can import that water to offset the overdraft that was declared by the court. We were already, at the time, pumping out more water than the average natural inflow by 2 or 3 times. So to reduce the pumping or to increase the imported supply, we had to do something. And the judgment is what created that reliable long-term supply by providing that mechanism to be able to bring that water into the basin. So as far as these obligations, Watermaster bills when excess water is pumped, more than the free production allowance. And when that water is not available through transfer or the party chooses not to transfer, they pay Watermaster, and then Watermaster turns that money over to the Mojave Water Agency, who then brings that water into the basin through its facilities that it was mandated in the judgment to build. This is something that I put together a long time ago, and I'm resurrecting it because it is just a great picture. I'm not going to dwell on it. You can go ahead and print it out and figure it out, but it depicts exactly what it is. The stipulated judgment, this contract per se, is in between the court, the Mojave Water Agency, and the Watermaster and all of the parties. It's what brings all of those pieces together and allows us all to work together to make sure that there is water here in the Mojave Basin for the future use. So what do we do? Like I said, we implement the judgment. It's basically a contract. There are approximately 425 parties that we have correspondence with on an annual basis, many of them on a quarterly basis. And we look at the pumping for over 1,750 wells. Those are just the parties to the judgment. If we throw in all of the other wells, we have records for north of 20,000 wells that exist in our agency boundary. There are a lot of straws that are down into the groundwater supply, sucking out that water. We process nearly, right on average, about 250 transfers every year. Parties transferring water amongst themselves to cover those obligations. We maintain the sub-area balances. We have a water master engineer that looks at all of the flows in the sub-areas, between the sub-areas, the flow into the basin, and right now he's actually doing a pretty detailed study. And then we make the ramp down recommendations to the court based on those sub-area balances to have FPA equal to PSY, so the free production allowance equal to the production safe yield. So any production over the free production allowance is then replaced through that replacement assessment, and then we recharge that back into the ground. The Mojave Water Agency already has imported nearly 200,000 acre feet, actually prior to this year, to pre-store those replacement obligations, because as we saw for many years, in the past 10 years, we had a 5% allocation, meaning we can barely get in enough water for health and safety, let alone to replenish the excess pumping. So we have something very unique in the Mojave Basin, is we have a lot of storage area in the ground. So we're able to pre-put that water in there to then be used later as an obligation. Then we monitor the water levels. Mojave Water Agency actually takes the measurements, and the United States Geologic Survey, they take the water level measurements, but Water Master is required to look at those on an annual basis. We have maps on our website that show the water levels that we look at. We have them on the back wall of our boardroom. So if you're ever at the Mojave Water Agency boardroom for a meeting or what have you, we have all those maps on that back door, on that back wall. So we collect the assessments. It's for mitigation and overuse of supply. Administration of the Water Master. Biological resources, that's for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I need to change that slide. They used to be Department of Fish and Game. And then we provide those downstream assurances like talked about, that make-up obligation that goes from one area to another, and we look at all the hydrology and make sure that it makes sense. Then the biological resource mitigation, we work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to make sure that the corridor that was outlined in the judgment maintains that natural habitat. Unfortunately, prior to the judgment, the natural habitat for pretty much all of Centro and Baja just disappeared because of the overpumping. So the water levels weren't high enough to keep any of the greenery in the river. Luckily, here in the Alto sub-area, in the upper areas, we still have that green phreatophytes, as they're called in the judgment. So we have to maintain the water levels because of the biological resource mitigation, and we have to consider the public trust. And then all of this information gets compiled into an annual report that goes to the court. We have filed 29 such reports with the court, and we are just finished the 30th year, and we're working on verifying the water production, and that report will get filed with the court by May 1st. Success. So what was achieved? We got physical balance. So we have the tools in the judgment to be able to balance the supply and demands for the whole basin area. And that's going to help us arrest the overdraft. We're not going to be able to correct the overdraft, but it helps us to prevent further overdraft from happening and then pay for the imported supplies. We have economic balance. The area is preserved. Back when the adjudication was happening, there was a lot of talk of moratorium. I know that's a four-letter M word, But there was a lot of moratorium. The projections were looking like we were not going to be able to have growth here in the basin 20 years out. And now we're 30 years out and we still have the ability to have growth because a myriad of things, but we have that economic balance. We have political balance. So we have equity in determining who is going to be able to pay for those rights. We have those production rights. It was a concession made by every single party to this judgment. Everybody made a concession to the other parties. Like I said, those that have the riparian or overlying rights, they made a concession to allow the industrial and municipal users to be able to have a water right, to have some basis to start with. So concessions were made all across the board. And how do we know it worked? Everyone was equally unhappy. That's how we know that we have a balance, because everybody was unhappy. There wasn't a single person that made out in the whole thing more than anyone else. So I threw this together to kind of give a final slide for specifically your situation. You're very unique. The Phelan Piñon Hills Community Service District crosses two sub-areas. So you have a couple wells that are in the Alto sub-area, and you have the bulk of your wells that are in the Oeste sub-area. And most of your pumping is in the Oeste sub-area, but quite a large portion of your populace is actually on the other side where you're not pumping a lot of water. So in the Alto sub-area. So like I said, you're very unique, and it's kind of challenging. You can tell by the base annual production. You know, you have almost 5,000 acre feet in the Oeste sub-area, but 355 in Alto. Your free production allowance for the year that just ended was 2574 in Oeste and 194 in Alto. And the water that wasn't pumped the prior year that you're allowed to carry forward for use in 22-23 was actually more than what you pumped, because the reporting period was through October 31st, and since y'all had reported how your production, given me your flow meter readings and everything, I went ahead and calculated what your production was for the year, and surprisingly, it matched with what you reported. So, yay. I like it when that happens. So you have 2,515 acre feet in Oeste and 110 in Alto. So the difference is just basically our credit to the basin. This is what the kind of refers to the special report, the detailed analysis that the water master engineer is doing right now. And he was ordered to do so by the court on a suggestion through some of the court filings. Normally, the production safe yield would only be done maybe every 5 to 10 years. We would reevaluate it. The current production safe yield that we are operating under was approved by Water Master and sent to the court in 2019. So we're really not at the point to where we normally would be reevaluating it, but the court ordered it, so we're complying with what the court told us to do, like we're supposed to. Currently, the Oeste sub-area is sitting at around 25% of that's what the production safe yield calculates to. So 25% of the 4,680 acre feet is what the court says we need to ramp down to be in balance, shall we say. The Alto sub-area currently, that would be at 50%. And so 50% of the 355 is what would be allowed. And that's pretty much the 194, because like I said, we're at 50.4 already. The analysis that the court ordered Water Master Engineer to do is, it's not due to the court in December, but the Water Master Engineer said that he would have it done in December. So that analysis is going to be presented to the Mojave Water Agency Board on the 14th of December. That's going to be the board meeting. That's the plan to have Bob Wagner come down. Hopefully he'll be able to come down. Never know with flights in December, but hopefully he'll be able to fly down here and be able to present that in person. If not, he'll be online to be able to present his analysis and his findings. That report will then be compiled and put together, and it'll come before Watermaster in either January or February. It'll get approved by Watermaster, then that will be the basis of our recommendation moving forward for the production safe yield and the free production allowance for all of the sub areas. Not much can really change in the Oeste sub area, just because the hydrology is not that difficult. We don't know a lot. There's a lot of assumptions in the analysis, but we base those assumptions on the studies that have been done in the past, and not much has really changed from when those studies were done. The Mojave Water Agency is working with the USGS to reactivate or to install new stream gauges in many of the ephemeral washes that come into the basin. The Mojave River, we know a lot about what's happening in the Mojave River. We don't know a lot about how much water is coming into the basins through all these ephemeral washes, like here in Sheep Creek, Cushionberry, and the likes. So we are working with the USGS and a third-party hydrology consultant to be able to figure out where the best places to put those in. So those are coming in the future. And those will, unfortunately, we don't have the data now, so it's not going to change anything in this production safe yield calculation. But when we start getting the data, we will be able to have more information in the future. So that is where I'm going to leave off and open it up to any questions. I'm sure you have 1 or 100. Just know, I'm not going to guilt trip you or anything, but my wife is waiting for me for dinner, so.
She's going to go hungry.
She actually called me when you were getting the presentation from your auditor. So.
Any questions? Nope.
Yeah, I do. On your minimal producers, you said they were 5 acre feet a year annually. They're not part of the adjudication in the basin, so that's 5 acre feet and below?
It's actually 10.
10? Okay.
Yes.
10 acre feet. And how many minimal producers are within our sub-basins there where we have our wells in the Oeste or Alto? Do you know by perchance?
I do not know the exact numbers. Our estimate on the pumping or the production for the minimal users out here is about 238 acre feet, okay. Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
That drastically changed when everybody started dropping a straw in the ground and irrigating cannabis, the jujubes. But a lot of the cannabis, from my understanding, is at least the illegal grows. The county is, the sheriffs, they're doing a really good job of getting rid of them. From what I've seen in my travels throughout the agency and my staff going out and doing the field visits, they're just disappearing.
All right. And then the other question I have on the Oeste Basin, as it butts in, you said not all of it's within your service area. Some of it reaches over the LA County line. And I know USGS does a bunch of studies throughout the different areas. Is that taken into account when we look at what the basin levels are doing? And if Mojave Water Agency has to recharge in Oeste, is that going to benefit the LA County side in the Oeste Basin?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know the exact answer.
Okay.
But my gut feeling is that's what's taking so long, because we don't want to put water where it's going to leave the basin, nor do we want to put water in the basin where it's just going to flow on top of the clay layers and evaporate out in the dry lake bed. So we want that water to actually get into the basin. So we may actually have to dig pretty deep to be able to get that water to go in. We do have some, they're not injection wells, but they're 30-foot holes that we have drilled to break through some of the clay layers down in the Morongo Valley area that we've put gravel and sand to be able to recharge. That's something that is just starting right now. So we're going to get a lot of information about how well that can get past those clay layers and actually recharge the ground. So that'll be a lot of good science that will help us design what we need to do out here.
Yeah, I worked for High Desert Water as our operations manager for a few
Okay.
years, so I'm
So you know a little bit about that.
Oh, yes, I do. And the last question I have, and then I'll let you go, is on water rights. So as we do future studies and things happen and we find out more information, does the district have the ability to move its water rights out of the Oeste Basin to the Alto if we find that recharge is benefiting more than just the Oeste within our service area into the Alto Basin, or are we stuck with what the judgment says?
The way the judgment is written, I hate to say you're stuck with it, but
Yeah, we can
yeah,
always appeal. Or, yeah.
the judgment's very specific that the water rights have to stay in the area that they can only be pumped from the area that they were developed.
Okay. I'm just thinking long-term, 30, 40 years from
Right.
now, if something comes, but that's all.
Well, and I know that there's been a lot of talk, and it very well could have been a request from you folks to tie into our R-cubed system.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that we can move water around the basin. Unfortunately, we have to make sure that they comply with the judgment, or that's one of those instances where the CSD could most definitely, if you have done a study or that shows something different than what we know, bring it to us. And if we still feel that we can't make that decision because of that pesky little, we have no leeway under the judgment, the judge might be able to do something.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that definitely no, but it would definitely be up to the judge to analyze it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your presentation.
No, my pleasure.
All right. Oh,
On the last slide, you had the pre-production allowance for the Oeste and Alto at 25% and 50%. Is that specific to CSD or is that in general?
That's specific to the sub-areas. So the 25% is for the Oeste and the 50 is for the Alto sub-areas.
For CSD or in general?
For all of the pumpers
All
in the
pumpers
sub-areas.
In Alto are 50%. All
Yeah.
pumpers in Oeste.
Correct.
Are
Yes.
25%.
In Oeste, there's like half a dozen pumpers anymore, so it doesn't really affect a lot of people. The CSD has actually purchased a lot of those base annual production rights from
So
some
the
farmers.
Oeste is that much lower than the Alto?
Correct. And it's really a matter of the supply. The Mojave River gives a lot more supply to the Alto sub-area. Those clay layers that I mentioned a little bit ago, why we don't want to just put water on the ground, it's because most of the clay layers throughout the alluvial fan from the Sheep Creek wash, once you hit our service area, that's about where those clay layers start. And we've seen it over the years. That water flows over those clay layers out to the dry lake bed and it evaporates. So what seems like is coming into the Oeste sub-area really isn't. It's just going out to the El Mirage dry lake bed and evaporating. Some of it does get down there, but very little gets through clay.
Have
Okay.
we looked, I'm sorry. Have we looked at doing any recharge projects before it hits the El Mirage Dry Lake? I mean, are there areas in Sheep Creek Wash where we can buy some land, and put some
Right.
recharge basins?
We
before
have
the
some
clay?
land and we actually have a turnout. You can't really see it very well on the size of map that's in my slide presentation, but the map that shows all of our facilities, if you zoom in the Oeste sub-area right there where the aqueduct is, we have a turnout that is in the Oeste sub-area, which means we can pull water out of the aqueduct. We are just trying to figure out the best way to recharge that, so there's actually a benefit here. Any other recharge location that's not adjacent to the aqueduct would mean putting a pipeline in, increased cost. Can it be done? Definitely. We can put that in and bring it up further up the Sheep Creek Wash. It would probably help Sheep Creek Water Company more than you initially.
I'm just thinking about like Chino Basin Water Master. There's recharge basins all over the place down there off of all the flood control channels.
Right. And we have a lot of those that we have in conjunction with the San Bernardino County Flood Control and the different cities that are trying to do flood control. We've had conjunctive projects with them in like Victorville and Hesperia and so we have the ability to put a lot of them. There's only very limited options for recharging the ground in the OSD sub-area just because geographically it's the smallest. And there's a very short space of time that the water is actually flowing through from the aqueduct.
And
Not
then
impossible.
The Barstow judgment, was it 30,000 acre feet? Is that where it ended up? 30,000?
It ended up 23.
23,000?
Yeah, 2,000 subsurface, 21 surface.
If more than that flows down in any given year, do we get a credit or do we not get a credit?
It's a very complicated set of calculations. Chapter 5 in our annual report has the actual calculation from the judgment, and then our current calculation, it's table 5.1. I'm sorry, 4, chapter 4. There is a credit that goes against the long-term deficit. So yes, there is a deficit that grows, and then that credit goes towards that long-term deficit. We only look at the base flow, not the total flow. So whatever is deemed to have been not the storm just rushing on, because that's the supply, that's the actual natural supply down to Centro and Baja.
And then finally, do we know how much water escapes from OSD and goes to the other basins? Do you guys have a number on that?
I do not. Don, I know that he's done a lot more studies out there than I have.
Yeah, it's I believe right around 100 acre feet or less than 200 acre feet of water of outflow from OSD. Yeah.
Oh, that goes from Oeste to Alto. Yes, there's a subsurface obligation. Yeah, it's about 200 acre feet. I thought you were talking about going over into LA County.
No.
See, I think the LA County side actually still flows into the San Bernardino County towards the river. That's what the hydrology looks like. But once again, you never know what's going on down there. We make assumptions like everybody does.
Depends on how much the carrot farmers pump.
Yes, this is true. And trust me, I've seen that. We actually fly outside of our agency boundary to get things like that.
Thank you.
You mentioned Sheep Creek Water Company. Are their water rights affected by the drawdown?
They are pumping completely outside of, or they were pumping completely outside of the Mojave Basin. So of our agency, some of the Mojave Basin does cover into the mountain front, but our agency cuts at the tree line basically. So all of their wells, except for the well that they just drilled recently, and they stipulated to the judgment for the water that they pump out of the well that's actually in our basin.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
I just got a couple questions. I can't let you walk out the door that easy. Thanks, Jeff, for coming tonight. So how many state water contractors are there in California?
How many state water contracts? 29?
Yes, 29. So out of the 29 state water contractors, how many of those state water contractors have their board also acting as water master?
I have no idea because not all of there are very few state water contractors who are actually agencies like us.
Okay. So it seems, from what I recall over the years that, and what I've heard going back to Dwayne Davis and Bill Smiley and those guys, is that water master, in their opinion, and I'm not going to ask for your opinion because I know you work for a water master, should be separate from the Mojave board, because when you have the graphic that you put up, you have the judgment, you have water master, and you have the MWA board, it doesn't seem to me that there's a checks and balance in that process. You know, one says, yeah, that's good, and the other one says, oh, of course it is. You know, we
Right.
looked at that last week. So I think some consideration should be given to that, because some of the producers may have lost some of the confidence over the years in possibly the water master engineer. And I'm going to go back specifically to the marijuana grows that we had in this area. We had an extraordinary amount of greenhouses. We knew how many plants were in each greenhouse approximately. You know, some die and some are a little bit larger or smaller. And we brought that to the water master engineer, who basically told us, you have no idea what you're talking about. We're still waiting for that apology. We haven't received that yet. But, you know, we gave him an estimate. It was 3 gallons per day per plant, which turned out to be a very accurate number based on ones that were connected to our system.
Right.
And so when you look at the number of greenhouses that were in this area that they ignored for a number of years, that production, I think, was probably approaching 2,000 acre feet a year, or maybe even a little bit more, based on the number of greenhouses that were here. And they did kind of nothing about it, making us kind of lose our confidence in their reasoning abilities for the Oeste Basin.
Right. Bob actually did a study for the whole Mojave Basin, and he estimated about 4,100 acre feet total was used on an annual basis in the greenhouses.
And
for
again,
cannabis.
that's substantial. I don't know how much of that was in ours. I know some of it was probably in Este. Out
Yeah.
in,
Well, some
in
of
that
it was
area
in
too.
Alto and Centro.
Yeah,
Some of it in Baja. I mean, it covered everywhere.
yeah.
They just started up here and then just kind of
Yeah,
went downstream,
so,
like
so I
most
couldn't let you go out the door without a little nudging to, maybe they should potentially look at I don't want to say if they separated water master or if they brought in a new set of eyes. You know, it's kind of like an auditor. We bring in our auditor, we use them for a couple of years or a few years, and we bring in a new set of eyes to look at the situation. But they've been using for, Bob's probably been there, 25 years?
Bob has been there actually longer than me.
Okay, so probably 30 years then.
So, yeah, I believe, I can't remember exactly. He worked for James Hansen
Right.
Engineering, who was their initial water master engineer.
So I think that they should consider something like that. You know, maybe they look at separating water master from the board to get a kind of a checks and balance in that system. So we really know what's going on out
The
here.
judgment actually has a lot of checks and balances. There's the sub-area advisory committees that are ordered to meet on an annual basis, or actually monthly, quarterly, whatever.
We are the sub-area advisory committee. There's nobody
Well,
else
actually,
out
you're
here.
not. Nobody, there
Yeah,
is no
there's nobody
sub-area
that-
advisory committee for Oeste.
There's
because
nobody here, yeah.
nobody nominated anyone, nor was there anybody to vote for. So there is no functioning sub-area advisory committee out here.
You're absolutely right.
So,
Because
you know,
when-
that's a check and balance that allows you as the pumpers to be able to get together and meet and make recommendations to the board of directors as water master to be able to make changes. So there are a lot of checks and balances in this. If there is anything that water master does that any party deems is not in compliance with the judgment, all you have to do is tell the judge that. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, we've had those discussions. But at this point in Oeste, how many active producers are there that would qualify to be on that? Because it's basically us.
Well, it doesn't even have to be an active producer.
Right, so we could just send the attorney down and,
You could have, all that is needed is and we're doing the elections again this year, so those will be going out. I believe we send out the nominations in February, but the nominations will be coming out. It can be anybody. There's been consultants that have been minimal producers that have been part of the sub-area advisory committees, been producers. There have been a myriad of different points of view. So-
Is there a minimum number of people for the sub-area committee? Because before, we had a hard time getting a quorum with Ducommon, Henniga, Eddie.
Right.
I mean, there's really,
It's 5 is the maximum. That's the optimum.
Yeah.
That's what they should have.
yeah, you can't find Chamisaw. They don't
Right.
live
Yeah.
in the area anymore.
Yeah, it could be 5 members from Phelan Hills Community Service District. Be kind of pointless because you'd all have the same opinion, but
Okay, well, I just had to ask it. But
Yeah.
I am concerned that, and have been for years, about the Water Master and the Mojave Board being one and the
Right.
same. You know, they're two different titles, two different stipends for attending the meetings,
Right.
but it's the same people. You know, they say yes, and of course, yes, it's the same thing.
yeah, there have been questionable discussion there's always been at least one member of the board while sitting as Water Master that has stated that, said, hold on, we're not MWA right now, we're not elected, we're appointed. We have a set of instructions that we need to follow. So once again, you can file anything with the court that would contest anything that Water Master decides. That's was built into the judgment as a
So
check and
Water
balance.
Master is appointed?
Yes,
Is that, and who appoints the Water Master?
the court.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. In any adjudication, the court appoints the Water Master. Some, like Chino Basin, is a separate entity. But being a separate entity, all costs of the Water Master's functions are borne on those who are pumping. In our case, the Mojave Water Agency, like I said earlier, Mojave Water Agency is required to do a lot of things under its act. And we have deemed about 50% of what Water Master does, MWA would need to be doing anyway. So MWA actually picks up 50% of the cost of Water Master. The budget that you see go out is half of what it really would be if all of the costs were borne by the pumpers. Your administrative rate would jump up probably 3-fold, maybe even 4-fold, just because MWA does not charge Water Master for the room and board, shall we say. So Water Master would actually have to have a facility. We would have to have a rent. So there's a lot of things that MWA, being the Water Master, actually makes sense both financially and just because we have the infrastructure and the staff to do a lot of that work.
Okay, thanks. We think you're doing a good job personally. I think you're doing
Well,
a
I
great job.
appreciate that. Thank you very much.
But there are questions, and
I
there
have
have been for
spent
a
my
long
career
time.
at Mojave Water Agency and the bulk of my career in Water Master. So I take pride in what I do. If I'm doing something wrong, please tell me and I will fix it.
Oh, no, I was taking a swipe at the engineer.
I know. That's okay. I still like Bob. He's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
He and I have been working together for 31 years, so I know him very well.
Thank you.
We've known each other before either one of us was married, so it's been a long time.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
In the last 2 years, the State Water Resources Board has changed the filing. It used to be, I do it for several
Right.
companies. It used to be at the year end, but now it all is the water year from October 1 to September 30. So has your data collection changed to that number also?
We have always used the water year.
So you're always water year. So
Yes.
you have the last year's water year file collected in order to get ready for your report that you
Yes.
send to the.
Yeah, the production data is required to be reported by the 31st of October, which we have yours.
Okay.
Which is how I was able to put what your production was on the slide, because
Okay, so all
I
of
actually went through and calculated it.
all of the sub-basins, you've got the data for the last year?
We have the data for most of them. Some people are slow in reporting.
Okay.
I can't get them to send me the data. You know? So we part of the things that we are able to do as a government entity, and this really sits under Mojave Water Agency, not necessarily the water master, but as a special district. We have a protective order with Southern California Edison Company. So we actually get the electric data, the electric usage, and pump test data for all of the large pumps that are up here in the basin. So for those that don't report, I have that to be able to use as a backup to be able to calculate how much water is pumped.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we've looked at every way to be able to figure it out, and sometimes we're just guessing. Quite frankly, we look at the aerial photo and we say, oh, yeah. We measure how much is being irrigated, use a land duty, and calculate it that way, but that's very few. 99% of the water that we verify that goes into our annual report comes from a metered source, whether it's a flow meter or electric records in a pump test.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Please tell your wife we're sorry we kept you so long.
I will call her back right now and see how she's doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are moving on to item 6B, update and discussion regarding ongoing chromium-6 mitigation.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this right over to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Burks. At the urging of the engineering committee, staff brought this forward to update the board on the ongoing chromium-6 mitigation. A little bit of background: on July 1st, 2014, Department of Water Resources established a chromium-6 MCL of 10 part per billion. In response, the district began working to mitigate chromium-6 in the district. In 2017, the Superior Court of Sacramento invalidated that, citing improper economic feasibility research. That court ordered the State Water Board to adopt a new MCL for chromium-6. It's getting very close. We anticipate that MCL to be at 10 part per billion. As soon as it's finalized, we'll bring that forward for the board as an update once again. Some of the completed chromium project 6 mitigation projects the district's done, well profiling. So we have profiled well 6A. It used to pump 210 gallons a minute. Through profiling and manipulation, we've gotten that down to 5 part per billion, down from 9.8, while increasing the flow. I wish this was the case at every well. It's not always the case. 6B, we were able to pull off the same from about 9.9 part per billion down to 5 part per billion. And in Mr. Rush's presentation, we do have some data that strongly facilitates that when the precipitation is coming down from the mountain, we use hexavalent chromium as a precursor, and we see those precipitation levels. You don't necessarily see them in static and pumping levels of the wells, but we do see it in the concentration of the constituent. And we've been working with their hydrologist with that data as we're building that database as kind of a proof in the pudding for that surface water recharge he's alluding to over off Cayucos. It's Oasis Road, west of Oasis off Cayucos. No, I'm sorry, it's west of Oasis.
It's right near the county line.
Yes, sir. Happens to be south of one of our bigger well fields too. Profiling at well 14 has yet to be completed. Well 10 has been profiled and a pneumatic packer's been placed. It's worth noting there, we can get that under 10 part per billion. We inflate that pneumatic packer, but we got to give up some production capacity out of there. Well 15 is getting very close to coming online. It actually has its sanitary survey tomorrow. And as soon as that production resource comes on, we can finish with the profiling at well 10. Well 9A has been equipped for production, doing about 120 gallons a minute. Its chromium concentrations 0 part per billion. Well 15 has been drilled. We're right about 90-95% complete with that. Basically everything's constructed there. We're waiting on a couple electrical components. basically the panel that holds the Edison meter and our motor control center. Everything else is built. We have our sanitary survey of that well tomorrow. Anticipate the permitting process another 2 to 3 weeks, and that's online. We acquired 929 acre feet of water rights. We tested wells 23, 24, 25, upgraded our server to accommodate for the well profiling, and we have a few projects left. Like I mentioned, well 14, we do have a full profile, and that is the district, today is the district's largest producer as our max day demand is calculated. However, well 15 is going to be coming online. The goal's by Christmas, and we're online to hit that goal and or very, very close. Well 15 is going to give well 14 a run for its money for the district's largest producer. So that'll be altering our calculation. A couple more projects left. Well 12, we did profile well 12. So we know the strata, we know what needs to be done. We just have to enact what basically our study and research has done. We need to alter the pump setting, cut down on production, and equip with a pneumatic packer. Another project for the district is the addition of well 16. So again, as I'm mentioning, that we have to cut some of these production resources. We can't always cut our production because our demand stays the same. So we have to bring more production assets to bear, and that'll be well 16. And then the last one is going to be a larger reservoir located up here where we acquired the property up on top of the hill here, up at 6A. And then we have the cost broken down and associated with that. I'm not going to read it off line by line. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer. The good news, the estimated remaining expenses will require a 5-year obligation resulting in a sunset date of 2028 for the Chromium-6 surcharge. So as residents in the community ask, it seems that the Chromium surcharge has no end. That's not the case. That end is in 2028. And then our fiscal impacts, for a total of $10.3 million, we've spent to date about 6.4, 6.5, with an estimated close to right around 3.9 or so remaining to bring the district under 10 part per billion as a whole. Happy to answer any questions, current or prior projects or.
Questions?
Yeah, I have one question. What is your estimate of the loss of production due to, for the district from all the wells due to the mitigation for chromium as far as lost production for wells, et cetera? Do you have a total for that?
Between 300 and 500 GPM for the loss between well 14 and well 12, and that's an estimate because we haven't profiled well 14. We're going to give up 200.
14 is not being used. That's
Correct.
That's a backup well.
Correct. But it still is production. Well 12, we know we're going to have to give up around 260, 280 gallons a minute. Well 10, right around about 150 to 200.
Okay, wait a minute. The 300 to 500 is your total, or are you adding these other numbers into it?
300 to 500 is total, with 14 being an unknown.
Okay.
That's it?
Just a comment. I'm very impressed. I was here through the good chunk of it since 2016. And to go from 17 million down to this is I'm very pleased. And there would probably be even more now with the cost of inflation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well 14, that's part of our water supply permit that's included in total production, right?
That is correct, sir.
Yeah, so,
And calculating our max day demand for Title 22, that is the district's largest producing source today.
thank you.
Sure. Good. All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Is there an area that you see more chromium-6 mitigation necessary than other areas? Is that something you're going to deal with future wells?
Both geographically and downhole. And downhole, I'm referring to below ground surface. That concentration seems to escalate quickly in our region, right around the 820 foot mark. around 820 feet, and we've profiled extensively. When we profile, we set a test pump, liken a well to a straw. We stick a pump down at different elevations. When we turn the pump on, there's a tool, and it looks like a big long stick. And we put a vacuum on that stick, and it has a wire, and we trigger it, and that vacuum draws in a sample. We do that at different depths, and we correlate those depths. We run a spinner lock, and that tells us the inflow of water into that straw. So when that pumps on, we can tell you how many gallons per minute this area is yielding, and then we sample that area, and it's just blending math, concentration, and that's pretty much how we well profile, and we can manipulate that strata up or down in conjunction with those chromium levels, but just law of average, anything below about 800, 820 foot, we really see that start to increase. Every well is like a person. It doesn't have a distinct, everyone's got their own personality, but that's what we see.
But it's like more north, more south, more east, more west. There's not much of a difference in the area.
They groupings. There is distinct differences in areas. We see a little bit more concentration to our western border. We see less concentration more towards our central and north.
Okay. Thanks.
I've also, one note on that, I personally have seen wells on the same 1 acre parcel that one yielded over 30 part per billion chromium, one was doing like 2 and 3. One well was doing a couple hundred gallons a minute, and I've seen another do 3,000 and 4,000 gallons a minute on the same acre.
Yeah.
So again, they all have their own personality, but we're playing law of average. And all these have been dictated by our profiling methodology, and it's been enacted. And like when we see those real results, especially coming out of wells 6A and 6B, where we're able to actually increase production by redeveloping the well, if you will, and then raising the pump setting, just drawing from a particular area that we want to source, and that's achieved with, it's called discrete sampling.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item 6C, discussion and possible approval of professional services agreement with IB Consulting. Mr. Bartz.
Yes, Ms. Sevi is going to take this issue.
All right.
Yeah, so as the board's aware, we negotiated rates with CR&R for solid waste collection service. We ultimately were able to have a rate stay on the most common collection type, which is the 3-cart service, provided that we conduct a cost of service analysis with an independent, mutually agreed upon consultant. CR&R has agreed to authorize IB Consulting to prepare this analysis and to share in the cost of the district. And so we're recommending for the board to authorize us to enter into a PSA with IB Consulting to prepare a cost of service analysis for solid waste collection rates. This will begin in January, and we'll have them ahead of time in order to start the negotiation process so we can be in line with doing our Prop 218 in April. And I believe, and we're working with our grant manager right now, that this study will be reimbursable through our existing grant.
All right. Any questions?
No.
No? No? All right. If no questions, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to prepare a cost of service analysis for solid waste collection services.
Then I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. All right, moving on to 6D, discussion and possible action regarding proposed modifications to section 4.2, health benefits in the district's personnel manual.
We're going to go right back to Kim with this one. She
Ms.
did a
Sevi.
terrific job putting this whole thing together, and I'm going to let her explain it.
Yeah, so we haven't updated this policy, I believe, since the manual was created before my time, so at least 10 years. And we've had significant changes to health insurance law since then, and also changes to our program. And so essentially what the revised policy does is it brings us in line with the Obamacare requirement of when insurance needs to start for an employee. And so that's in here. And then it also talks about our new health reimbursement arrangement program in lieu of medical insurance. Also, dental and vision insurance participation are optional through our current plan, whereas a long time ago, when we were with Aqua JPIA, if you participated in medical, you also had to participate in dental, and we don't anymore. So that's cleaned up in here. And then just the budgeting portion of it, we're just going to make sure each year we look at this through the budget process to determine what the contributions are going to be. So that still stayed from the prior policy. And so with that, we just recommend that the board approve these revisions to section 4.2 of the district's personnel manual.
All right. Any further questions over here?
I just assume our attorney has reviewed the changes and fulfills all the requirements or necessary things.
Yes, I have reviewed and I'm fine with those changes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there are no further questions, I will make a motion to approve the revisions of section 4.2. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to 6E, update on solid waste program implementation. I'm just going to go straight to Ms. Sevi.
Yes. Me again. A very brief update. We have surpassed 2,500 applications. 66% are opting for collection, 34% for self-haul. I'll be speaking at Kiwanis tomorrow at the VFW. If anybody's interested in attending. I have no idea what I'm talking about yet because they haven't asked me what they want me to talk about. So I just have a very general presentation for them. And then I think I reported this to the board already, but we are able to get the data we need from the transfer station on dump card utilization. So that's definitely going to help us in our rollout next year for anybody who hasn't turned in an application yet. So we're going to be able to do some cross analysis of who's using their card versus who signed it for service and who hasn't reached out at all in order to get in touch with them. So that's kind of it. Any questions I can answer?
No questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, 6F, update on the proposed Civic Center and Phelan Park expansion.
Oh, I'll take that. Well, from last week's update, there hasn't been much to present tonight. I did include in a manager's report, engineering manager's report, a layout of where we're at with a lot of submittals and approvals. And a few of them are just in place for the contractor to pull permits and get those approvals. So they're in, it's just a waiting game now until we get the contract for the appropriations and move forward with the contract or advertisement for the project. And with the park, CEQA, as I mentioned, was completed. And we did receive comments. They're a typical boilerplate that you'll get comments from with AQMD and Fish and Wildlife. Just typical comments that throw in for every environmental study that comes their way. So our senior planner is working on those, on responding to those comments and then having a complete set here done in the next month or so. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. All right, agenda item 7, committee reports, starting with engineering.
Engineering's next, we'll meet next in December.
Okay, finance?
Madam President,
Yes.
was there, I think there's 6G item.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not on my printed agenda right here. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
No problem. You're going to hear quite a bit from me on this one, so.
Oh, boy.
He's prepared.
That's why I skipped it.
I don't blame you.
All right, item 6G, discussion and possible action regarding extension of Circle Green lease at 17900 Sheep Creek Road, El Mirage, California.
We're just going to turn this right over to Steve. He's got
Right
a lot,
over
he's
to
got a
Mr.
lot to say.
Kennedy. Okay.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As was mentioned, this item was not originally on the agenda. Staff had to post it on Saturday to add it on to the agenda before the 72-hour requirement for regular meetings. The document included with the staff report is a letter dated November 2nd, requesting modification, a second modification to a lease that was entered into originally back in 2018. If you look at page 9 of the supplemental agenda materials, specifically section 2B,
Big number 9.
and the last 2B, the last sentence in 2B, tenant shall exercise such option for a renewal term by providing written notice thereof to the district no less than 6 months prior to the scheduled expiration of the then current term or renewal term. We received this letter 6 days before the expiration of that lease. And I will spare the board my editorial on that. Let that speak for itself. What I do want to say is that I have some grave concerns about this proposed amendment to the lease. Specifically, when it comes to the merits, if you look at the terms of the lease on page 8, recital C identifies what the properties are, and that's the George's Field and Home Field are combined as the definition of property. Section D is the leasehold, which is the premises, which is a portion of George's Field and Home Field. So that is how premises is defined in recital D. That has legal significance. If you go to section 19A on page 19 of the supplemental materials, we see that the purchase option applies to the premises, the portion of the property, not to the full property. So when you go back to section 2 of the second amendment, the proposed second amendment to the lease, what Circle Green is asking for is a purchase option for each of the properties. In other words, both properties, rather than just the current premises over which they have a purchase option. So this document, I cannot recommend that the board, I hate going against staff recommendation, but I do not recommend that the board approve this lease. It seems to me a better approach would be if the board were inclined to just extend out the current lease, that it could waive the 6-month requirement and allow Circle Green to exercise the option that they have under the terms of the lease to extend out that lease for an additional 5-year term. But what that means is because we received this at such a late date, we would probably need to enter into some type of agreement for that. So what I'm looking for is authorization from the board to move forward with negotiating a separate agreement if the board were inclined to extend out the current lease, that an agreement that would waive the 6-month requirement and, make that retroactive so that there wasn't an expiration of the current lease. And then I would bring back that agreement to the board, hopefully at your next meeting.
Yeah, and Steve and I had chatted about this a little bit earlier. I did contact Mr. Sutton. He said he would be in favor of the board doing that to allow further negotiations.
Questions, comments over here? No? Mark?
I was just trying to figure out the manipulations that Steve described. So they've crossed it up and I don't know whether purposely or not, mixed up the different properties. Is that what they did?
Well, I mean, I don't think it was intentional. I think this is part of the function of what we've tried to negotiate with this is that, these terms, these agreements took a lot of work to put together. And that 6-month term did not come out of midair. That was a significant part of what was just negotiated and discussed. And when that is not adhered to, these kind of things happen. It takes time to draft these up. And I'm not going to say that there was anything untoward on how this was done. But what I will say is that there is a reason why these timeframes are important. So that when there is a language of this sort that perhaps has legal significance, that can get caught when there is time to review it. And unfortunately, there just wasn't time to review it since we got this 6 days before this meeting rather than 6 months. And so I don't think I'm going to say it's not intentional. The relationship that the district has with Circle Green has been good. So I'm not going to say that try to pull a fast one. But that's why these timeframes are important.
Okay, so staff's recommendation is to just extend the current?
Yeah, staff's recommendation is exactly what Steve said.
Is exactly what Steve said. Wow, that was, wow, no wonder he's the general manager.
That's why we have attorneys.
My God.
All right, so you just recommend
You just want a
extending the existing
consensus?
one and waiving the 6-month?
My recommendation would be to give me instruction to draft something consistent with that I would then bring back to the board for approval.
Okay.
Okay.
So it doesn't require any board action.
It's just a consensus
consensus.
for you to move forward.
Right.
Sounds right? Attorney's recommendation?
Yeah, there's a number of things. One of the issues that was brought up by Circle Green was on the dollar per, I believe it was $1 per ton or something like that for material is brought into the site. The way that it was worded in the initial contract, was for feedstock for power generation. And they said that wasn't the intent. The intent was that it would be for any material brought on the property. So there's some other things that can be cleaned up in this as part of that. And I think if we let Steve do his magic with this and incorporate all the appropriate terms in this agreement, Circle Green said they would be willing to work with that.
Sounds right.
Sounds good. All right. You have consensus. Go for it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay. Now I'm confused. All right, item 7. So we already did engineering, finance.
Finance meets in January.
All right, legislative.
Nothing to report.
All right, and parks, we have a meeting coming up in a couple weeks. And waste and recycling.
We meet next week.
All right. Perfect. All right. Item 8, staff and general managers report. Anything to add?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. If I can just add an update.
Of course.
And this is on the culvert bridge on Phelan Road. As mentioned last week, a selection on a contractor was made, and they're going to be mobilizing Monday. We have a meeting with them tomorrow, pre-construction, to protect our line that's on the bridge. So yeah, they're looking at breaking ground here probably real soon. And that's for 4 wing walls and road repair on Phelan Road where the undermining occurred. So again, they said they would, their target date is before December 30th. They have 30 days to complete. Contractor is allowed to work holidays and weekends to get this accomplished. So should be open before the end of the year.
Very good to hear. Thank you. All right. Number 9, director's reports. Start with Deborah.
Nothing to report.
All right. Mark?
Nothing additional.
Chuck?
Nothing to report.
Greg?
I have nothing to report.
All right. And my report's in the packet, but I had gone over that last week. 10, correspondence and information.
Just the items in the packet with the revised tree lighting ceremony, I think.
We said,
This is
did
the
we say
revised one.
5:15?
No, this isn't the revised one. It's
Yeah.
5:15
Okay.
that the movie starts. So if you don't want to miss any of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, make sure you arrive at 5:15.
Perfect. All right. Let's see, moving on to 11, review of action items. Were there any prior meeting action items?
Yes, so the portable fuel tank information, I believe we discovered that it's a very low cost and it's at the staff's discretionary level of spending and will be taken care of.
Okay, and current meeting action items?
It's going to be posting the Mojave Water Agency presentation and the audit presentation to the website.
Perfect. All right, and next board meeting, November 22nd.
The recommendation for that meeting is that we cancel the meeting, being right before Thanksgiving. Probably wouldn't have a quorum.
We're in agreement with that? Excellent, perfect. All right. So at this point, we are going to recess to closed session at 7:07 PM.